this off. So welcome to our first community forum. This is inspired by a couple of different things. First, on a retreat that I run every year, we have something called fireside chats every evening, and we throw a bunch of open-ended, big ambiguous questions into a big bucket, and we just pull them out one by one and have a big conversation around it. And I thought, why not bring that concept to you all in our online community as well? So I hope to do many more of these. We'll see how today goes. It's just nice to be in real dialogue with people in this industry around topics that I think we're all thinking about, maybe in the back of our mind, or even writing about or researching or wondering. And it's nice to bring it into a table format and just chat about it. So something we're going to offer up here right at the beginning, and we were just talking about this before group, we don't actually know where this quote comes from. So if you do know, please help us give it some attribution. This was offered to me in a workshop a couple weeks ago, that in this process over the next hour, please accept and expect non-closure. So the goal here is to stir the pot, and that can be uncomfortable because we're not going to walk out in 55 minutes and go, whew, solved that problem. I never have to worry about integrity in the coaching industry ever again. It's just not going to happen. I think it's par for the course in this work that we're going to bump into this from time to time. Hence why we're here. And because of that, we are here to have open-ended, vulnerable, non-solving conversation that I hope gives you a place to be seen and see each other, and also ask those questions that you've been wondering about or pondering over the last however long you've been a coach, even maybe before then. So if you're just joining us, welcome. Thank you for being here. I want to give Kate as best I can an introduction for those who don't know Kate Hawley. Kate has been in my world for a number of years. She's someone who I use as my external integrity metric. So if there's something in my business that I wonder, would Kate do this? That's usually my measurement for whether I should go forward or whether I should ask her some bigger questions. So I could think of no one better to help facilitate this today than Kate. So thank you for being here and for joining us.
Thanks, Andrea. Wow, that's an honor to hear. I hold such a position of esteem for you.
Someone's got to. So here is, let's just kick things off. So I want to give a 30-second backstory, and then I'm going to just throw questions in. We're going to discuss them. It is an open forum. I want you all to raise your hand, either literally or use the little hand raise button on your Zoom dashboard there, and participate. You can also just observe. You can just sit here and listen for the next hour, and that would be participation as well. So you hang out here however you want. I was at that same retreat on the way out of town, about to head home. And one of our attendees sent me an article about Brooke Castillo, and my blood started to boil. And I was sitting at this coffee shop about to drive 2 hours home. And I thought, why am I reading this right now? I'm just going to stew on this for the next, 2 hours of silence in the car, which is exactly what I did. And I got home and I came to the same conclusion I always come to. I can either go, that is just, there are bad apples. Sometimes that phrase gets used in our industry, and we can just go, yeah, too bad for them. I don't have to participate with that. I'm not going to worry about it. Or I can do the more scary and vulnerable thing, which is to say, what if this isn't something to ignore? And what if there's an opportunity here for us to actually have a conversation that is scary and hard to have? The title of the article is what really captured me, even though it was singled in on an individual. I think it's about a more systemic problem, and they were using that individual as a representation of that. And that is why I wanted to have this conversation, because that's all of you. You are representative of this work as well. And I didn't see myself represented in that article, but I did see my industry and our industry represented in that article. And that is always a little scary to see. So if you haven't seen the article, we did link to it in the event page for today. You're welcome to go back and take a look at that. Okay, Kate, anything you want to add before we dive in?
No, I'm ready to dive in.
Okay, first question. Let's just rip off the Band-Aid. What is our responsibility within an unregulated industry? And if you aren't sure what I mean by unregulated, raise your hand and I'll pop some notes into the chat box. But what is our responsibility in an unregulated industry? And I'm going to throw it over to you, Kate. Kick us off.
Great. Okay. Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is how tricky it is with coaching because it's such a broad term. So, like, I've recently, just this weekend, I met a couple of women who call themselves coaches, but their background is working in the school district. So they're like equity coaches in the school district, right? So they have the same word associated with their title, but like really different training background that it wouldn't make any sense for me to say, well, we should have gone through the same standardized training because what they do, I believe, is pretty different and it's pulling from a totally different skill set that is their background. So, like, because the first thing I want to say is, well, people should get training, right? If we think of like regulated industries, we think, well, there's some standards of education and there's like some ongoing mentorship and capacity to like have somebody who maybe is a little bit more experienced and wise in your field who can like see you from the outside and continue to like mentor you and give you feedback and help you with like the bumps in the road or reflect to you if you're doing something that might be out of integrity. And that is all very optional. So like I feel like that does happen in the coaching industry, but you have to kind of like set it up for yourself and pursue it and self be self accountable. So those are some of my first thoughts. And I want to just add that with Brooke Castillo, the thing that is universally problematic about coaching that I've observed in her, I've listened to her podcast for the last few years, and one of the thoughts that continually comes to me is, wow, she has absolutely no way to be held accountable because she uses her own process of your thoughts create your reality to dismiss any criticisms that she ever receives that she doesn't agree with or doesn't like the way they feel or that belief doesn't support the result she's trying to create. And so, which makes sense because you're like, well, yeah, she's using the work to do that. And it makes sense when she justifies it out loud. But then you're like, but if we just do that, if we just do thought reframing for every single thought that we don't like or a belief that doesn't fit, like that doesn't really help me be successful, so I'm just gonna like toss that one in the garbage. It leaves a lot of stuff that's in our, I guess, blind spot, if you will. And so that, I guess, for me is the biggest like sticky point here is like, how do we get held accountable and who will do that? Okay,
Yeah.
back to you, Andrea.
This is why I brought Kate along. I think immediately what comes up for me is unregulated does not mean lacking accountability, but I think oftentimes in an unregulated industry, at least in this industry, it does become placed upon the practitioner to create that sense of accountability to integrity, standards, and ethics. And because it's not regulated, you're not going to be you're not going to be taken down as a coach other than public opinion going, hey, this is kind of wonky, if we don't uphold those standards. And whose standards and how do we discern those for ourselves? And then who are we asking to hold us accountable? Is it our own industry? Is it people outside of our industry? Is it a governing body that have come together and said, here's a collective understanding of what's ethical, and we hold ourselves accountable to that standard and in our own practice? So I want to open it to the floor. Does anyone else have something they'd like to add? Yeah, Karen, thank you.
Yeah, well, two things came up from the article and just now. The first, I don't know Brooke Castillo's work that well, but like from the article, it just seemed like one of her main driving forces was like money making in her business. And not that that's bad, we're all worthy of making money, as I'm learning. And yet like that seemed to be like the primary metric. And I feel like, Andrea, you talk a lot about this, but like you can be someone with mass appeal and not necessarily be doing work that's like grounded in like the greater good. Or I think for me, what I'm learning about myself a lot is that having more of like a spiritual grounding has been really helpful when it comes to ethics, but I know that that is really wonky and hard to offer to everybody doing this work. The other thing that came to mind in terms of accountability and training and regulation is that like I come from a therapy background. I got my master's in social work and was like on track to become a licensed therapist. And I just know so many people who are licensed and are not necessarily doing ethical work, or like from what I've seen and heard and big like movement now to hold those larger systems accountable for some of the things that are being swept under the rug by people who are licensed and not really valuing lived experience as much as like training. And I just think not having that doesn't necessarily, like, it's a false duality that if there is regulation and accountability systems, that those are like better or that those are working well. And again, I think it comes back to this, like, what are you grounding in? And I don't know, I have a lot of curiosities about ethics, because as I've done this work and like worked in community mental health settings and in like crisis work, like so much of it comes down to gauging how centered I am and how willing to take in feedback, but also willing to hear my own feedback. And that it always was difficult as I was training people to do the work, because you can give guidelines and you can give rules of thumb and they're like only helpful to a point. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Karen. I think we're seeing a lot of resonance with the reminder that regulation doesn't automatically mean there's going to be ethical grounding. And that's like, why not? What's gonna, so if there's licensing boards or governing bodies, is it irrelevant? Because at the end of the day, it's up to the individual to hold themselves accountable. I want to shift from that into a topic about ethic practices and some of the harmful things we see. This question comes from Chrissy Marcourt, who couldn't be here today, but wanted to be a part of the conversation. She asks, based on the article and perhaps others, what are some of the harmful practices that are emerging from the coaching industry? Oh, so many. All right, let's make a list.
That one hits hard. That one hits hard. That's a good question for my sister Chrissy. Oof.
Mm-hmm. What comes
Shall we
up
start
for you,
with
Julie?
toxic positivity?
Who's making a list?
Let's start there. Spiritual bypassing,
Mm-hmm.
social inequities, social injustice. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but it has, I was scrolling through the gram this morning, getting, just thinking about my day and everything. And this ad comes up. Be a certified coach and an NLP master for $7. I about died.
I have no comments.
I think our friend Chrissy should ask for her thousands of dollars back, as she, is well immersed in that NLP training this week, right? And it's just like there are so many people that the coach flag is being flown, and they got their certification from Udemy or this homie who's selling it for $7. And the harm that will be done, the harm that will be done is immeasurable. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Julie. That came in like you arrived.
Oh.
I wasn't sure if you were going to share today. Thank you for showing up.
The disruptor in me. She's getting fiery, and I'm gumption. Like, who are you?
I think I want to add to that too, the rise, and I hope someday the fall, of meritocracy-based self-development, as well as that individual-centered. You are your thoughts, and your outcomes are a byproduct of your beliefs only. It's that hyper toning of limiting beliefs and limiting stories without giving any context by which the individual is steeped in. I find that incredibly harmful. And then this excessive amount of self-responsibility we're taking for things that we cannot unhook from, I find that really dangerous as well. Kate, what are some that you want to add to our list there?
Yeah, those are all really good. I know like one specific example of some of those that I've thought about ever since I kind of ran into coaching is how sensitively we must approach things like talking about, say, like victim mindset, which is sort of the underlying thing in a lot of this, like, because we don't ever want to be victim blaming or victim disbelieving or victim denying about like the world we live in, which is absolutely full of very real, legitimate victims of very real, legitimate oppressors. And at the same time, we all know, whether we self-identify as having been a real victim or not, that it's extremely empowering and liberating when you get to find the tools within yourself to not be stuck in that place. And so the tension when you're on the outside of that and you're trying to support somebody to hold space for the reality of what they've been through, while also holding space for the part of them that is capable of having choice inside of that. I think you named a lot of the different, I think in this last couple of people who spoke, there's a constellation of the things that we have to understand in order to hold space for that, right? Like we have to be trauma informed, and we have to understand all the inequities and all the disparities and all the systemic problems and all the ways that we may have been personally advantaged. And so we think that we're just such badasses who never got stuck in a victim mindset, but that's maybe because we never actually got pushed down to the level that some other people did, or like because we have certain abilities that we were born with, right, et cetera, et cetera. So the yeah, I don't know, that one to me is the one that I'm constantly negotiating. And I'll share a personal example of this if that's helpful, where because I grew up with a mom who has kind of treatment resistant depression, and so she has been in a mental health challenge for most of my life. And I kind of became the like resilient one who like started doing yoga and doing coaching and finding all the tools and finding ways for myself to overcome whatever mental health challenges I was struggling with. And the conversations we've had over the years have really been fraught with like this tension of like me having to check. I really don't know her lived experience and her brain chemistry. And I cannot say that the things that worked for me are going to work for her. And at the same time, I can sometimes see her getting stuck in the rut of her belief about herself that she is this depressed person, or she, you know, or the self-identification with it. And I'm not her coach, and so I don't try to fix it. But I'm saying that like it's a constant weight for me to like navigate, wanting both, right? Wanting to honor and hold space for just like, yes, totally. You get to be just as you are. And if you want to, there are tools that might help. And like, that's the, you know, being in that space of like, I can't promise you results. I can't guarantee that I know how to solve this for you.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes, coming back to, for one of the core tenets, I think, in coaching is helping people move toward choice and creating more options in someone's life. We call it being an options facilitator. But those options are relative to someone's lived experience, right? So it's that a little bit of that paradigm of, yes, someone can be a byproduct of circumstance and context. And also we have choice within that. And it may not be ideal choice, and it may not be what's clearly represented as the more thriving choice, which I think is unfortunate. I think we put some hierarchy on what is the epitome of success in coaching versus what is relative to the individual you're working with. And I think those two things hold equal for me. And that is sort of the dance. Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, I also think what's tricky in coaching is that it tends to be time limited. Like you're working with someone for 6 months, and not to say that therapy does this any better, but I think with the promising results, it's like people are doing their work for a lifetime if they're actually doing real work. And it's really tricky to get someone to want to engage in the work by giving them a sense of what's possible without like I've seen it when it works well, that when you're at the end of that time frame, that you have more of an understanding that it's ongoing. But I think it's really tricky at the outset to not promise without like disregarding how powerful it is, and that's really touchy. And then the other thing that I thought of when Kate was talking around like power dynamics and like and how my brain works, it's like we find something that we believe has like a negative truth in it, and then we want to generalize it to everyone, because, and like Brooke Castillo being like, this is what it is, so it works for every single situation and everything. I think that's really dangerous, and it doesn't acknowledge like the diversity of people's lived experience and their capacity and their willingness and their resource availability and all of the things. And I struggle with that often. Like, what, I think I got something, but like, then I try to apply it to every single situation, and it's not, life doesn't work that way. And I think like bringing in nuance is always important.
Yeah, beautiful. Cece.
Yeah, I was thinking I was having a quick conversation with my Pilates partners at the studio, and we have the same problem in our own industry. I don't know if I call it a problem, but it's the same type of thing. And we have overseeing bodies. And I guess I'm looking at like, how do we bring integrity to our coaching industry? It just makes me think of how do we all align in a way where our coaching, the definition, whatever that loose definition is, how it kind of, I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but how it, so people know kind of what they're getting when they're getting coached. I know I'm way off of what everyone else is sort of talking about, but I'm thinking about like, how do we inform the public on what coaching is and what coaching isn't? And in the Pilates industry, it's the same problem. We have the Pilates Method Alliance. I believe there's a couple overseeing bodies where you have to do like a third-party test. You have to pass a third-party test and whatnot, so that you can't just be trained by someone for $7. And then if you are trained for $7 and you go try to take the Pilates Method Alliance test, you are not going to pass it because you don't really have the training for it. And I was just thinking about in terms of integrity and like being able to have people know what coaches are and what we do. I guess I was thinking that I was looking at that kind of conversation too, like just, you know, how do we make it so that coaching isn't consulting and therapy and all these other things that roll into it. So I don't know if there's the overseeing bodies, if there's multiples. I don't know what anyone thinks of that. That's kind of what I was looking at.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. I'm going to come back to that with our next question. Trudy, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, as you know, so I'm LCS certified through Brooke Castillo's school. And so I have a unique perspective on this. And so when I read that article, it was really interesting because to me, it was incredibly biased. Since I've been in the school, I was attracted, I'll be honest with you, I was attracted to her message. I got certified in March of 2020. I was attracted to the message of you can help people and make money at the same time. So that's where she got me. So I'm just curious, Andrea, what made your blood boil? Where do you think the lack of integrity comes in with Brooke Castillo and her method, I guess, of business?
Yeah. I think she is and I just want to acknowledge the vulnerability and the courage for you in this conversation. Thank you so much for joining and asking these questions, knowing that you've come, because I knew when I posted the event, I have LCS coaches in the community, and I was taking a pretty big swing at your teacher. So thank you for joining us. My outside opinion, and it's biased because I'm not inside of her trainings, is that her programming is a bit of a pyramid. And I think there's a self-inflated, I think she makes money off of her coaches by having her coaches coach on her behalf, and she pays a very small percentage out to her coaching staff. I also think the cost for her school is incredibly inflated and inaccessible. It's not ICF or AC or BCC accredited. It doesn't have to be, but she's taken a pretty strong stance against it that I think keeps her in that bubble where she gets to run the show, which can be quite damaging, and doesn't even consider the fact that her coaches could go on to unintentionally but unconsciously get themselves into sticky situations with clients. So those are just a few of the things that I've seen that have had some red flags about. She's not the only one in our industry by any stretch of the imagination who I think is operating in some scary territory, but she's certainly either completely unaware, which I don't think is possible, or is choosing to be unaware for the benefit of her business. And I find that a little scary.
Unaware of what exactly?
Ethics in coaching. Just small topic.
Okay. Well, the fact is I'm here and I'm in your group and I'm coaching with you too.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm this, oh my God, Brooke is the savior of coaching
Yeah.
or anything.
Yeah.
But when I read that, I could have been one of the people being interviewed too, it was just really interesting. I think you have to go deeper. I just encourage everyone to go deeper with her work. And it's not just change your thought and everything's going to be good. That's a very simplistic and naive way of describing her work. So I want to just put that little plug in. But how do we bring integrity? Let's get back to the question. How do we bring integrity? All of the conversation today, I think it's an individual. We bring the integrity to our business. So if somebody's, posting a $7 ad for coaching, is there a way to stop that? I think you, as a customer, you have to be discerning. Maybe I could have been more discerning and said, I'm not willing to pay $18,000 for, well, it was a year long. It was 6 months of coaching. And then you get another 6 months of an entrepreneurial track if you choose that track. So, so I think there's some onus on the customer as well and the client to discern, whether or not that you're going to get what you're paying for, I guess, too, in coaching. So that's my 2 cents there. That's a big question, Andrea. How do we bring integrity to this field?
Yeah. And I don't disagree with you. I think that there is some responsibility on the consumer, and the consumer is operating with a pretty slim amount of information that is being promoted by really big names. And I think the bigger names in the industry, for me, are very one-sided and one-noted in what they're promoting. And I think it's missing, for me, what underneath it is more impactful coaching or more effective coaching. And that's just, having been in an industry for a while, that's just some of the things that I've seen. The highest paid coaches in the world are men, and the second highest paid are white females, but at a very small percentage. And 75% of the industry is female, and 70% globally is female. And so I think we're also just seeing a lack of representation in the industry, because that number, for me, should correlate with where people are getting their training and where people are getting their information. And it doesn't correlate. Those numbers don't connect. And so I think when we don't have enough voices in the room, it leaves a lot of space for people to get down the train track with a really booming voice without anyone to say, hey, wait a minute, is there some danger here? And not having a system of checking yourself or holding some of your processes accountable when they go out and impact thousands and thousands of people. So I want to shift here ever slightly, because part of coaching is also business. And I think where a lot of the integrity and ethics, in addition to our practices, can get down the rabbit hole rapidly is in how we run our businesses. So many ways we can approach this. I want to ask the question, how do we measure true success in coaching? And I'm going to start with you, Kate. And then I'm going to open the floor up to everybody. How do we measure true success in coaching?
Wait, so could you put that inside of a context, like success with what?
How do we measure success as a business while we are in service?
Success as a business?
Yeah. Because sometimes I think that, and I'm open to dialogue here, that sometimes our business practices are in contrast to what is actually in service of the individual. And I think it's to the benefit of our business over service. And I think where coaching has been given a little bit of a unfortunate green light is that it can really be seemingly successful for people, but behind the scenes, their people are not actually getting the service that has been promised. So how do we measure success as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is interesting, because this has been bubbling up for me in the last conversation, is the discernment between business practices and the practices of the practitioner, which are sort of two separate skill sets and, things, which, because I feel like when we were talking about for Castillo, part of what we're actually talking about is not so much who is she as a coach and is her coaching good, it's what are her business practices, and are her business practices ethical, and do they align with the integrity of the teachings and the things that she's actually trying to create in the world. Besides money, they clearly do align with money, but that to me feels important in this conversation, because so I was thinking about when Cece was sharing about being in the Pilates industry, because I used to own a yoga studio, and yoga is also unregulated, but one of the very thin veneers of sort of, I guess, not gatekeeperism, but just like some level of like somebody is going to see what you're up to is the person who might hire you to teach at their studio. So like people would go do the $7 yoga trainings, but they wouldn't get hired at the studio. So there was kind of this like natural filter for like, if you did great training, if you're really good at what you do, you will naturally in the business kind of have a spot that your peers and your community and other people see and support. But with coaching, the way it works is so very Wild West and really entrepreneurial. So what it actually translates to is if you have the most visible, efficient, effective business practices, you will rise to the top, regardless of your coaching skill or training or background. And there may be no way for people to vet you or understand the context of what they're getting into. Like there's, because with coaching, it's not like there's Google reviews and Yelp reviews. I mean, some people do have those, but like a lot of times you're like, I can't find a single thing other than the self-contained universe that this person has to actually understand what I'm going to get when I get in there. So I guess to me, it feels relevant in the measurements, because it's like, it's one thing to be successful in the coaching container, and it's another thing to be successful at running a successful coaching business. And my really big question that I don't have an answer for, but that I feel like I've been unpacking for the last few years is, how would you have a successful business that's super deeply integral to what success as a coach also means? And Andrea, you and I have talked a lot about that with when we were talking earlier about, well, we can't make any promises, right? Because making promises would be it would be counter to what we can actually do as coaches if we want to hold space for what the work really is. But marketing would say, what's your bold promise? What are you promising people you're going to do for them? What problem are you going to fix for them, right? What thing are you, and so that language and those types of questions, they don't match, right? And I mean, Andrea, your whole body of work, I think it does a really nice job of trying to bring more congruence to those things. So you probably have plenty of great things to say about it, and everything in your community addresses this, in my opinion.
The work in progress.
Yeah.
Part of this forum is to check myself. Am I really doing what I think I'm doing? Are there questions and conversations that I'm not privy to, that because it is, even as much as I do my best to practice integrity, I am also a self-contained universe of Andrea Lita Land, full of all of my coaches. And so that doesn't have a lot of accountability other than the accreditation we went through, which only looks at my work, when it's up for renewal. So in the meantime, there's thousands of hours where I'm out informing and instructing and teaching and mentoring and upholding my own business. And it can get squirrely. That's for sure. Katie.
Yeah, I think this is bringing up, I really want to reach for a model of a place that's done this well. And there aren't a lot that pop to mind. Even if you imagine an office that has an HR department, it's not necessarily true that the HR will actually have an open dialogue with the employee and relay what they need to the manager or whatever else. And so it feels like part of what's difficult about this is we're in uncharted territory and trying to take this super intuitive, curious, open-minded thing of hey, do you want to pay me so that you can be lost on purpose in a safe-ish space? And then translate that into certainty of here's where you will be in 6 months, exactly 1 mile ahead of where you were 6 months ago. And it doesn't match up, but also part of navigating this uncertainty is being our coachy selves in that ambiguity and being great, so here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here are all the things that I just don't have answers to. And being somewhat open about that in the things we create and share, to say like Kate, I think you talk about this a lot around scarcity of here's what I'm thinking about for myself. Here are questions that I'm bringing to clients, and here are the things that I still don't really know how I feel about, and that's okay. I think one demonstration that I've witnessed where it felt like there was solid oversight was actually at Awaken Your Practice in person. We were doing a lot of money work and deep work, and Andrea had assigned 2 helper people so that if you had an emotional reaction or you needed to check in with someone besides her, there was someone to turn to where you could say, like, here's what's going on for me. And there was no risk. There was no like, oh, I'm going to tell Andrea what you said, and then you're going to be in trouble or something. It was just like a very neutral, like, here's another person you can check in with. And I feel like that's really missing in a lot of organizations and businesses of like, there's no person for my clients to talk to if they have a terrible session and they're just unhappy with how things are going. They can talk to me, but that's kind of dangerous in an emotional safety belonging sort of way to be like, this isn't working, which I mean, I give lots of consent. I say, let me know if this isn't working, but it'd be really cool if there was some system in place that felt safe and open to receiving all types of feedback and would be heard and processed in a mutually beneficial way so that the practitioners are learning and the clients feel like they have space to be seen and heard in those kind of rough moments too.
Yeah, all very valid. Yeah, Karen.
Oh, that just makes me think of like there's a big movement in mental health to have more of a peer support model. And it's really interesting. I'm not, I'm steeped in like the theory of it. I know people who do that work. But with coaching, it's so fascinating because you could, and so self-selecting in a lot of ways, because it's like I've had people as a friend or be like, well, I was talking to my friend about what my coach said and I got some good feedback there, but then the friend isn't regulated, or like you're also self-selecting who the people are in your life. And I think like part of what breaks my mind from being able to hold this conversation for too long is like on some sort of deeper level, like who are we to say what people need in that moment? So, and I like when I have clients that I struggle with, like part of me wants to be like, they're not able to receive this, not because it's my fault or their fault, but because that's just what's happening right now. And that doesn't absolve me of accountability of trying to be flexible and like do other things. And it's not the opposite either of like, well, they're just, whatever. So there's the power dynamic that I always think of that comes into play. And like Katie was saying, like someone, especially with trauma, I used to work with volunteers, and my sole mission was like, hey, let me know if like you need more. And also I'm going to give you more, even if you don't let me know, just in case. And so many people came in with so much trauma from other workplaces that they just like didn't believe me. And fair enough, I'm sure I didn't do it perfectly. But then I started realizing that our organization was also saying we were offering all this support. And then I started doubting, like, I don't think we're actually offering this. But anyway, I think a big thing that also comes to me is with all of this is like, is it necessary, or to what degree is it necessary to have a established singular definition and framework when the whole purpose of doing this type of work is like working on such an individual level? And how do I not throw the baby out with the bathwater when I get frustrated with that question?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Karen. Chrissy.
Yeah, so I take a little bit more time to process things, and that's something that I've learned about myself. So some of my comments are kind of related to bits and pieces of our whole conversation together. And I also wanted to just say that a lot of my background is in teaching and in education, which is a regulated industry and regulated different here in Canada than it is in the States. But coming from that particular background, all of these problems that we are talking about as coaches are 100% evident in teaching, and not just in like, BC or in Canada, like specific to my district? How do we do things ethically? How do we individualize for people while at the same time maintaining some kind of standard across a school, across a district, across a province? So I think one of the themes that I'm hearing from a lot of our comments is we can't oversimplify this. Coaching is so different to so many people from the coach end in terms of what we do, and also to the clients that are coming to us. Like, everyone does things differently or wants something different. So I don't think us oversimplifying and saying, well, this is what has to be the training, or this is what has to be a standard, is going to help. It's just going to splinter what is happening further. When we were talking about, like, you know, how do we guide our coaching and our business practices in a way that is ethical, something that kept popping up for me was the idea of values. The values that we have, you know, you can talk about that as spiritual practices. You can talk about that as, you know, connection to the universe, like whatever those values mean for you, that making sure that we use those to not only guide our actual coaching practices, but also to guide how we structure our businesses. If I'm going to say that growth and compassion are part of my coaching process, let me see that too in the way that I structure my programs and interact with clients when I'm talking about money, when I'm talking about how to structure their program in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. And I think probably the last thing that I wanted to mention is that something that I have personally been struggling with is when people ask me what I do. And so I've been super, super hesitant to actually say, oh, I'm a life coach, because those words have been so biased according to what people's previous experience is, whether that's from like something like this article, or whether it's from having personally had a coach, or whether they think that life coaches are like fakes and frauds, that I don't automatically lead with saying that I'm a life coach. And so I'll read you what my answer is at the moment, because I feel like if we describe ourselves just as a life coach, it gives the other person that opportunity to self-describe. They're going to jump to the conclusion. But so what I say when someone asks me what I do, I say, I co-create personal growth plans with my clients and support their progress through individualized coaching programs, workshops, and resources. And then I talk a little bit about who I specialize in. I say I specialize in clients who are interested in leading with their values, improving their communication skills and their ability to set boundaries, and who want to recognize the role their hearts play in their success and their decision making. And that is just so much more descriptive and actually tells the person what it is that I do, as opposed to them assuming what I do as a life coach.
Will you share that with us in the chat box with attribution, of course, but
Sure.
so beautifully phrased. Thank you for offering that.
It's taken me a while, and it's a work in progress.
I can tell. Thank you. It's much further than I've gotten in describing what I do, believe it or not. All right, last question I'm going to throw into our group, which we're not going to get to the whole of in the next 11 minutes, but it's worth opening the conversation around, is that of scarcity. I'm bringing it in because I think when I think about integrity and ethical practices, congruency and alignment as practitioners, a lot of the time I see practitioners abandon so much of their alignment when their businesses are not growing in the ways that they desire. And that is often fueled by either scarcity, scarcity thinking, or buying into improper mythology around what it means to grow a successful or sustainable business. And we happen to have someone here, Ms. Kate, who has been studying scarcity pretty deeply for the last couple of years. So I wanted to bring this question in with her in the room in particular. So I'm going to open it up, but I would love to hear from you, Kate. What role do you see scarcity playing in business, and how is that potentially having a negative impact on how we show up with integrity as coaches?
Oh gosh. Whew.
It's 10
like
minutes.
The whole, you know, as, oh, right. Like, well, so in the first 3 episodes of my podcast, which is all about scarcity mindset, I try to like establish where we're coming from here, because where we're coming from is that the entire field of economics arose from the assumption that scarcity is the nature of reality. And you can see this. Can you guys hear me? Because you're all frozen looking. Did I freeze? Am I back? Okay, good.
Yeah, you're good, Kate.
So good. Now you're unfrozen too. Great. I like it. So when I think of everything I learned about how to be responsible in the world, it was based in the assumption of scarcity and the fear of scarcity. And when I think of everything I learned, say, I took business foundations at Mercy Corps a couple different times, like in my 20s and again in my 30s, and absolutely love Mercy Corps. It's an amazing resource. And the business foundations class they taught was super standard. Like, here's how you make a business plan, do your SWOT analysis, do your competitive analysis, do your, right? It was all super standard. Like, none of it is controversial at all. But it is, when I think of it, I think, but it's based in an absolute assumption of scarcity. Like, who's your competition? How are you going to be better than your competition? Well, how are you going to, you know, it's all coming from that place. And so really, Andrea, it wasn't until I met you and also like Michael Naus and some of the coachy people who I just encountered, who were just talking like a different language and talking as if scarcity wasn't a problem. And I was like, what's up with these like snake oil salesmen? Like, they are trying to talk like scarcity is not a problem in this universe and we just don't even have to worry about it. And it took a lot of, but I was so fascinated because it resonated with something deep in me that was like, that's how I want the world to be. That's how I've always had this like suspicion that the world could be, right? And so it's such a, when we ask like, how is scarcity impacting the way we're doing business, it is the way of doing business. It is business. It is the free market. It is the economy. It is everything we live in. And so to try to operate without that being your baseline, you have to really rework mostly your relationship to faith. And that's very difficult to do when you also are trying to approach this from a rational thinking, like evidence-based, grounded perspective. However, this is my whole mission right now, is to show that like there is just as much rational, evidence-based content that supports that we don't live in a scarcity verse, and that we have to start looking for that and finding that and proving that. But that sometimes you have to take a leap of faith to be able to prove it, right? And that's the thing that I think all of us have probably experienced, or we wouldn't be coaches. Because to me, the entire coaching journey is like proposing to somebody, okay, you want this thing that you've already convinced yourself you can't have because you have all these scarcities that mean you can't have it. I don't believe that you have those scarcities, and I'm going to try to show you, or I'm going to try to help you see that if you take these leaps of faith, there are resources that will support you in the universe, but I can't guarantee it. I can't make any promises, and I can't be responsible if you take the leap of faith and you just like fall on your face. So you're gonna have to, you know what I mean? So it's like a really tricky position, but I totally believe in it because I've been through it enough times to be like, oh yeah, when you get to the other side, that's why people keep jumping, because they're like, who are all these people on the other side who are living these like not hustle, financially sufficient, dream like Dharma aligned businesses? How did they get there? And then they go buying like programs that promise them, I can help you make $1 million in 30 minutes, which I have totally fallen prey to over and over and over again, until I finally realized they're just going to ask me the same 5 stupid questions about my customer avatar. And I'm really tired of filling those questions out. So I just was like, no, I can't keep going for that. That's not going to work. There's no way around. You have to jump, right? And that's why we're coaches, which is maybe a good wrap up point to say the work we're doing is super important in changing the world, right? And like, I do believe that, and I'm sure you all believe that, or we just wouldn't even be here. So it's really that thing about like reclaiming that and making sure that we're really trying to change the world and not replicate the world. Because what Brooke Castillo is doing in her business practices in some ways is a replication of the scarcity economy, right? And we are trying to change that. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. That was awesome. I appreciate your commentary and also your perspective. And that's, you know, when I get into these places of, am I in the right did I pick the right industry? Should I just stuck with my degree in social work, kind of like Karen? Should I have gone through with my master's in therapy? Should I have just like put myself in a safer standard box? I have to be reminded that I believe in the creativity of unknown futures and the potential of reminding people that we do not have to be beholden to where we come from. And that does take faith and that takes practice. And I think the integrity piece for me is trusting your skills and trusting the lens that you're looking through. And if you don't have that or aren't sure the lens that you're looking through, I think we do have to be willing to ask for people to look at it and say what might be translating poorly or what might actually be potentially harmful. And that's vulnerable and that's scary. And it might not always be good for your bottom line. Sometimes I think we have to choose the client over the profit, and sometimes they go together and sometimes they don't. And I don't ever want someone to bankrupt their business ever, but I don't think that's the alternative. I don't think you're either super successful and you have to undercut your clients, or you're not successful at all, but your clients are well served. I think that binary is really dangerous as well. And I don't know the perfect middle ground, but I think these are the types of dialogues that help bring it to the surface with more possibility. Would anyone like to offer anything else up before we wrap up for today? It could even just be a takeaway, or you can use an emoji if you want to use to express your feeling walking out of this conversation. And please know I read all of the chat box. If not in session, I go back through and reread it. So thank you for your notes and engagement in that format. I appreciate all of you for being here. Yes, Cece.
I'll say one thing. I remember being at a conference. Ron Fletcher is an elder connected to Joseph Pilates, and he was a very gruff guy. And he would say, as we moved forward, as the word Pilates got released to the public and all these Pilates instructors started popping up everywhere, he said that he called it the Pilates Poop. And he said that the Pilates Poop would eventually fall away, and that the people that can really create the change and bring forward the work of Joseph Pilates are going to get the results for the people. The ones that don't get the results, they're not going to be able to create a thriving business either. So I think, I know this is bigger than that, but I think in this unregulated area too, poorly trained individuals, if that's part of what's happening too, it's just these quick trainings and stuff. If they can't get the results of the people there, I think they're going to struggle creating a coaching business, at least with individual people. Maybe they can learn how to train coaches, because coaches are people that want to be trained as coaches. We jump on quickly and we spend our money, but we need to watch out, to where we're signing up. I think the poop starts to fall away because people they won't make money at it if they can't create some transformation or change either. So I think that's the bright side, maybe on some level.
Yeah, it's true. And I think consumers are becoming more informed around coaching, which I think is in our favor, and are starting to hold our practitioners more accountable in public ways. And as disheartening and as biased and as unfulfilling as that article was, it puts it in the hands of the consumer to make some decisions about. And it was incredibly one-sided. And again, it's not about tearing down one individual, certainly just keeping a keen eye on how this industry is being represented to the people that you hope to serve. And each of you are a representation of this industry. And I hope you lead with that. And I always get feedback from my coaches that they want a different name than coach, because coach has been absorbed by so many other processes that they don't like. And I just implore you to stay. Otherwise, we will never change the representation of this work. And I believe so wholeheartedly in this work. And so please stick around and wear it with pride, because I think the beauty of this work is true and honest and really accessible for change for so many years to come. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Kate, for joining us for an hour. If y'all haven't, she has an incredible podcast that I know she's been working so hard on for the last couple of years, that it finally came out, called The Space Beyond Scarce. Please check it out. It's amazing. Thank you all for joining us. This was wonderful, exactly what I needed selfishly. And I will be posting this next week in the community, and maybe we'll get to do this again sometime in the new year. All right, y'all, take care. Good night. Good afternoon. Thanks, Katie. Bye.
Bye, everyone.